Thanks for continuing on with us. My name is Ibrahim, Sani. I have with me in the studio Tindaro Danze, the President and CEO of Siemens Malaysia. Tindaro, thanks very much for taking the time to speak with us. Let's do a quick recap on Siemens Malaysia, particularly on the digital transformation journey. How has it been for Siemens?
It has been, I think, a great journey over many years. I mean, Siemens is in the country for decades. And as the Industry 4.0 transformation was, starting off, we were part of that from minute one. And we have been in different fields, as in digitalization, be it in the manufacturing sector, but also, I think, very important in the infrastructure sector. One thing that I could think of is the transformation of how we actually measure our grid, our electrical grid, and how we make sure that the data that we receive, we turn back into the analytics of it and make sure that we are very efficient the way we use electricity.
Of course, nobody will accuse Siemens of being behind technology, but the question now is in terms of staying competitive. It's extremely crucial for us to understand how Siemens is trying to stay above and beyond your competitors in a landscape where the incumbents are not only pressured against the cost pressures of a large company like yourself, but incumbents are also faced with new, rising, smaller, more nimble, more lightweight companies, particularly that does not have that kind of overhead to challenge you in some areas that you do well. How do you navigate this whole very competitive landscape in the element of Industry 4.0?
I think one ingredient, Ibrahim, is really bringing together the digital world and the real world. What that means is actually you have high competition in the IT field, so ERP system and different enterprise management systems. And then on the other layer, you have we call it operational technologies, which is a different set of competitors. We have little competitors in the market that do both. And that's really where the strength of Siemens comes in. So we are actually, a lot of people don't really know, we are ranking among the top 10 software companies worldwide, among Oracle, SAP, and you name it, right? So we have both arms, and that's very important if you want to play the game of Industry 4.0. You need to bring together the software arm and the operational technology arm, and that's where we kick in.
How do you tie the Malaysian business with Siemens operations globally? Where are your strengths, particularly when it comes to the market reception here? Where are the markets that you feel that you can do well and outshine yourself in Malaysia?
Yeah, I mean, what is really remarkable about Malaysia is actually that we have a quite sophisticated semiconductor industry, which is very important. And I think it will play an even more crucial role in the geopolitical situations we have at the moment, right? So that's already very good for Malaysia as a market, and we as Siemens have the right technology support this semiconductor industries. Where really I wanna focus on in this market is the small and medium-sized enterprises. We have a lot of them here in Malaysia. I just learned, perhaps a background, I'm just in the country for 4 months, right? So I'm still having a learning curve as to what's going on here. But what I learned is that the economy is very dependent on the small and medium-sized enterprises.
Some estimates show up to 97% of all enterprises in the countries in this sector.
Exactly. And now the question is how we get all these little, I call them mom and pop shops on board, right? Digitalization is sometimes a buzzword where people are afraid to embark because they connect in their mind high investments, risk in return on this investment. And I pledge Siemens for really taking this risk and not shying off. To me, it's not only something that the big internationals should look into. Actually, the small industries, the small machine builders that we have here, and we have plenty of them in this country, that are also exporting into global markets. Those are the companies I want to reach out and get on board in this journey.
Wouldn't that be a departure in terms of your clientele, your normal clientele, where you target governments, either Ministry of Health, for instance, or large organizations like banks? Will this be a transition out of having these large customers, both MNCs and governmental organizations, into trying to grow your presence among the small and medium-sized enterprises?
To me, Ibrahim, it's not really mutually exclusive. To me, it's more bringing this ecosystem together. So why not actually opening up all the learnings that we have with big organizations, opening that experience up to smaller companies? So, if we developed an app, an industrial app that is well proven and used in a corporate a big player, why not having this app available via an ecosystem to the smaller companies? So to me, it's more bringing these two together rather to make a decision to go just one or the other.
Let's talk about the everyday lives of Malaysians as well as the operations of the companies that you serve. How are their lives, their everyday lives, going to change moving forward when it comes to Industry 4.0 adoption, and where would be the challenges lie?
I think the really in the core is when you embark digitalization, you will be more efficient the way the resources you have at hand. Now that's one good thing about it is it plays into sustainability, but the other thing is cost efficiency, right? And to me, the economical rationale and the environmental rationale has to come together. So small companies can participate in a growth by really investing in digitalization, because then they can reach out to a greater audience because they are connectable. What they do, what they sell is connectable to a greater ecosystem. And they can achieve improvements without big investment, but really little investments. One example I want to give you, Ibrahim, if you allow me, is the SaaS model, software as a service. So we don't have to have big investments in IT systems, but you actually just pay for what you use. And that's brilliant for a small and medium-sized enterprise, because they don't have to entertain a big IT department and all the infrastructure that comes along with it. But they can use already modern technology by buying into a SaaS model, right? And they really just pay what they use and see if they're satisfied with the outcome and can scale from there on.
You know, this is something that's quite interesting, right? Because SaaS has been around for quite some time. In Malaysia, businesses are quite familiar with SaaS. Yet the rate of adoption amongst the SMEs is actually lower than expected. This data come from Ipsos, that one that I read very recently. Also, another element is on the adoption of IR 4.0, where in the long run, businesses can see the improvement of the business by bringing costs down, but the investments would be high initially, of course. Yet the adoption again is slow. So maybe you can unpack us in terms of why do companies not adopt these kind of changes, even though it's good for the firm. Is it more of culture? Is it more of adoption? Is it familiarity? What's driving the hesitancy on mass adoption amongst SMEs to improve on the cost efficiency of their business?
It's a very good question, Ibrahim, and I'm still trying to get to the ground of that for Malaysia. But from
and by the way, I don't think we can get an answer today. I suppose I think culture is supposed to be it.
Well, I think there are three elements. Culture is one, right? So really getting the people to think about it and say that's actually a topic for me to look into. Why that actually should bother me. The second one, awareness on the content. What is out there in terms of technology to really utilize? I feel that sometimes there's a lack of knowledge what is already available as in technology. SaaS is one thing. Is there really the awareness? And the second thing is, do we have the infrastructure? And by infrastructure, I'm not only speaking about the hardware, but also when you look into government, do we have the framework of the government that is actually encouraging us to take that leap of faith? And do we have some risk mitigation through governmental frameworks? So framework of the government or infrastructure, you can call it, the content, technology, and then the mindsets that we have to, I think, change.
My neighborhood mechanic, it's an old man. He used to do tire balancing using this analog machine of his. About last year or so, his son took over the business, introduced a bunch of things, including mechanized, computerized way of doing things. I won't speak out of turn. I don't know what he does with my car. Yeah. Cost went up, I do admit. However, turnaround time is faster, he uses less mechanics and so on. And yet I still go, not because of the price, but because of the speed, reliability, the awareness, the brand. It's the same mechanic that I've been to for the past 15 years or so. This is the kind of small changes that I would like to see in amongst all SMEs, but it does take a transition in terms of ownership of the business. Used to be his dad is around. I saw him smoking, just watching my car. Probably he doesn't know how it works now, I suppose. But the son is driving it. The son is about 40, 50 years old, something like that. So do you see this transitional change among generation as the key factor in terms of technology adoption amongst SMEs?
It's certainly a factor. And I think important is that we induce this idea early in the education sector, be it the universities or the vocational trainings. I think you have to familiarize the future workforce, the next generation, with all these topics. And being educated in only one segment, be it electrical engineer or mechanical engineering or software, won't do it. I think if you really want to take on this transition, you have to have a good, broad knowledge across different disciplines. Certainly everybody has his deep dives, but you should have a broad knowledge of how all that plays together, how all the value chains play together. And then you have, I think, a workforce with the next generation that is familiar and also trusts in investing in this technology because they can see the value behind it.
You touched upon governmental regulations. Government of this administration is actually quite critical in terms of how they can formulate framework. I spoke to the Minister of Climate Change very recently. He introduced the ideas of how businesses can actually approach greener solutions, and he's intent on bringing greener framework into play right now. This is one ministry. Another ministry of interest is the Health Minister. I spoke to her off air, and she was mentioning that some of the hospitals in Malaysia, while they do have the state-of-the-art machines, scanners and the likes, they don't necessarily have the right personnel to teach, to use them. So there's also that element. So as you can see, this government is just trying to get a grasp on how things are run. Agreed that they're still new at their job. Many of them are doing this for the first time. How do you think this government is faring when it comes to introducing framework and infrastructure, as you put it, in terms of inculcating a good adoption of Industry 4.0?
Right. I mean, that's a very valid question. And I see some development. Just recently, I think yesterday was announced that the Center of Fourth Industrial Revolution is being launched.
Yeah.
And I think that's the right mindset, because what this center, I believe, tries to achieve is bringing different stakeholders together from the private sector and the public sector, right? And that's exactly where we need to come together and define standards. So see, Ibrahim, the first thing I did when I arrived in Malaysia is I tried to find what is actually the standard we measure against, whether we have a high degree of digitalization, degree of maturity of digitalization in this country, be it in the manufacturing side or infrastructure side, or we don't. And I miss to have that common standard. So if we don't define what success looks like, it would be very difficult to measure our progress and our success. And I think that's a conversation that I would like to pick up with the government and say, let's agree among federal, state, and all parties involved, and the landscape is very scattered in Malaysia, just figure out. But let's agree on a standard as to how we measure actually the maturity of digitalization in certain sectors.
Are you saying that that standard is still in formulation right now? It's not being ascertained just yet?
Well, there are different standards, but from different bodies. So now what is the common standard, right? So, and that's really I think the art, to say every standard that has been developed is rational why it's there. But if we don't have a common standard across the country for the industry landscape, who tells if we are successful or not?
The Center for Fourth Industrial Revolution that you mentioned was mentioned very recently. Malaysia does announce the setting up of the Center for Fourth Industrial Revolution, or C4IR. This idea is to accelerate a post-pandemic economic recovery. The independent center within the WEF, or the World Economic Forum, is also meant to support Malaysia's overarching vision of the 4IR policy that was launched a few years ago. And under the Malaysian Digital Economy Blueprint, we have had spokespersons, both from MyDigital as well as WEF, just this week, as it was announced. And I would still try to see what would be some of the key things that it can do. Perhaps finding the right standard could be the main stay point of Center for Fourth Industrial Revolution, or C4IR.
Right.
If we don't know, if we don't have that standardized measurement of how things are supposed to be, particularly when it comes to digital adoption and maturity of the market, how can we then move ahead? Do you feel that adoption of such standard is actually quite critical before anything else is done?
I would set that as one of the priorities. The second thing is, what if now you are successful selling this story and people buying in, everybody's going online? The second thing that will come up is, do we have the infrastructure? I mean, how is the data actually in the network flowing? Do we have enough data centers to digest all this data? I think that would be the second thing to look in, because this has huge implications. A data center, for instance, Ibrahim, is using a lot of energy, right? It's about, I just looked it up for this interview, 1,000 kilowatt hours per square meter, right?
Oh, wow.
And a data center usually has like 50 acres, right? So you can make your math. So the implication for the government is to, if I push digitalization, what does this mean and imply for my infrastructure and for my energy sector? Because if I have to entertain all this energy, I probably don't want to do it with fossil energy, because we have also...
it doesn't answer the sustainable question.
There you go. So you come back in a loop. So these all are interconnected topics to have a discussion with. And that's why a framework by the government that really looks into all of that is very, very important.
The predilection that a company as big as Siemens and as complicated and intricate as Siemens is that you have too many things happening at the same time. And as a CEO of a country, you're trying to manage all this happening while trying to be in concert with your global operations, with your regional operations. How do you know which one is more important than the other? And please don't answer everything is important, because if everything is, nothing is. Do you see a prioritization or a list of prioritization in terms of what must be pushed ahead in terms of growing your operations in Malaysia, at least under your tenureship?
Yes. I mean, I come back to what I said at the beginning. I think digitalization is my core theme. Be it in the sector of infrastructure or be it in the sector of manufacturing. It matters everywhere. Even if you look into the Malaysia's 12th plan, I think you call it, all the agenda points, left, right, center, somehow includes the leveraging of digitalization. So that's going to be my core, right? But to make that work, I need to ensure that the whole ecosystem is leveraged, and that includes small, medium enterprise companies. And I think we are not doing enough there yet, because a lot of people are scared off by the name of Siemens and think this is a big company, I can't engage, I'm too small, I only have 100 people.
No, that's my follow-up question, right? Because SMEs would look at your company and say, that's a good company, that's not for me. That's the worry that I have in terms of you growing this particular segment.
Exactly, and this is the fear that we have to take away. So what we're doing at the moment, we have built up I call the Digital Enterprise Experience Centers in Penang, because we have a lot of things going on there. And what we really want to offer is to small and medium-sized enterprises, come to the center, try we call it POC, proof of concept. So you come with a use case, a problem that you have, something you want to explore. Explore it with us at a low cost. It's just like, it's like a playing ground for adults, right? Samples, right? See how you feel about it, educate yourself about the technology and the price, and then you can take an informed decision. And that fear really we have to take away by giving them low entry points, low risk entry points. And I think that's really, I think, the next step we have to look
Focusing specific on Siemens right now, we're looking at this technology as being the backbone theme of the company for this year, for this country, under your tenureship. What would be some of the kind of items that you can share with us on air when it comes to empowering your team? Is it more capital injection? Is it hiring more people? Is it re-skilling some of your people to be a little bit more SME-centric, a little bit more down-to-earth, so to speak? I think you know what I'm trying to get at. Where do you feel the requirements are? Is it people, capital, technology? You got to get more technology from your group partners and many more?
Technology is one thing. So you have to know that Siemens here in Malaysia is operating with a big partner network. So a lot of our sales, a lot of our customer engagement goes not as a direct business, but it goes through our partner network, right? Okay. So educating our partners as to what other technology we have is important, because a partner usually...
You got to know your wares, you got to know your products.
Exactly, yeah. So usually a partner signs up for a certain product group that he's interested, and perhaps is totally unaware of the rest
and
of the
that happens all the time.
Exactly.
That goes for pharmaceutical companies as well, by the way.
Yeah. So we have to educate that on the technology sector. The second part is really also, yes, to tell them, focus on small and medium size. What is our offering there? How we can zoom down a big offering into some small, bite-sized offers that are interesting for the 97% that you mentioned, right? I mean, it's a huge market there.
You've been in this country for 4 months. You have had quite a coverage in terms of the markets that you operate in. How do you feel Malaysia is at when it comes to some of the regional markets, especially being the head of digital industries in Siemens and many more other countries? Is Malaysia up to par? Where would be the skills that Malaysia have that could supersede some of our partners or neighbors? And where do you think that the issues are lacking or the challenges that lie for Malaysia in terms of trying to push ourselves ahead compared to other markets?
Right. I mean, we have to appreciate that Malaysia in ASEAN is in high competition to other countries. I've been in Vietnam before, I've been in Indonesia before for a couple of years. So those countries are not sleeping. They're investing a lot in this sector, right?
I would say we are. So.
And Malaysia is doing their homework, but I think Malaysia could be much more vocal about what they can do, about the talents they have. The semiconductor sector is huge, and the OEMs, local machine builders, delivering into that semiconductor market, it's big. But frankly, before coming to Malaysia, I didn't know that. So Malaysia is not very vocal about the abilities they have on that end. And I think
what I normally compare is that collectively, Malaysia and Indonesia are the world's largest palm oil exporter. It's a huge industry, and yet our E&E sector is bigger than that. Correct. So that is something that is quite unfathomable for folks that might not know our country. But yes, you've been in this country now and you are aware, and you're not the first person to say that we're not shouting about this point enough in terms of the E&E sector. Okay, that's one point. What about other areas?
I think we have to be very mindful on what we do in the educational sector. I've seen other countries that are putting much more efforts into that. And I can give you an example just from Vietnam, because that was very recent. I've been there. And from the HPSC study there, they said that in average, the household average spends 70% of their income on the education of their kids. Now that's freaking commitment, right? If you spend 70% of your income on the education of your kids.
It's an investment every step of the way, not an expense.
It's an investment, exactly. They look at it as an investment, right? And I think that's a mindset that I admire, and I would like to induce a little bit of that also here in Malaysia.
Fantastic. Final word before I conclude the conversation?
Well, I'm really looking forward into what the government is inducing with this Center of Industry 4.0, and you can bet we're gonna throw our chips into that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for coming over. That was Tindaro Danze, the President and CEO of Siemens Malaysia. You can learn more about the company. Just head on to Siemens Malaysia website and find out more there. Also, a lot of research on this topic can be found here on Astro AWANI. Just head on to astroawani.com and find more resources there. My name is Ibrahim Sani. Catch you in the next one.